In this bubble tutorial video, I'm going to show you how you can add Google Street View to your bubble app. And we're going to be using the Google Street View static API, which is a fantastic way of, if you provide an address such as this, if I say Buckingham Palace, we then get a Google Street View image for Buckingham Palace. And of course that could work for any address around the world where there is Google Street View. But before I launch into it, if you're learning Bubble, there's no better place to go than planetnocode.com, where you can find even more Bubble tutorials than you can find on our YouTube channel. We've got tutorials exclusive to our members, and you can only find it at planetnocode.com. Now, as I dive into this, if you take nothing from this video, it is if you are working with API keys and you're working with like a JavaScript API or this API that we're using here, if your API key appears on a page, you need to think about it and you need to be taking precautions about how you do that. I need to underline everything I'm going to say because the API we're using is this one here, which is the Street View static API overview, and you'll notice that part of the URL that makes up the image URL, which is down here, is your API key. And now if you know anything about building web apps, you think, oh no, I can't put an API key in a public facing bit of code like this. Well, you can, as long as you follow Google's recommended steps and best practices. And I'm going to cover some of them here, but I'm just going to say it's really up to you to understand how, when, what precautions you take when using a Google API key and putting it on front page, public facing or user facing content. So I'm going to go into my Google Cloud Console here, and the first thing I need to do is set up a project. In the process of doing that, depending on where you are in the world, Google might insist that you add some payment details. But once you've got your project, we then need to go to APIs and search for Google View Static and click on there. And then I've already enabled it here, but you'll see that you need to click the enable button, which will be here if you've not already enabled the API. And then, depending on the onboarding process, Google might also create an API key. And so we go into keys and credentials, and I have an API key here that it's created, and I'm going to go in and click edit API key. Again, don't take security advice from me. I'm not a Google Web Console expert. Read the documents for yourself, but this is what I think is required at the very least. So there's my API key up there. I will be deleting this after this video, but you need to add in the precautions of set application restriction to websites, and then add in using the guides that we've got here, add in your URL or your domain or your temporary domain for your bubble app, making sure that you don't enable it for all bubbleapps.io, because that would be anyone who's created the bubble app. Make sure it's specific to your bubble app, following the guidelines here about using wildcards. Notice that there's no trailing slashes at the end of the domains, and then restrict it to a specific API. You don't want to be using a API key that you're using for other Google services. You just want to lock it down as much as possible. And so I've locked it down to the specific development subdomain that Bubble gives me, and I've locked it down to just the Street View static API key. So there's one other thing here, and I'm not going to cover it in this video, but you can take a further step. And in fact, we've got it in red here. Google strongly recommends that you use both an API key and digital signature. Now, if you want to learn more about digital signature, I'll include a link down below. But if we look here, it's a combination of your API key, which is locked down, and a signature, which I believe works a little bit like a token. I believe it refreshes. If anyone's got any tips on how to use the signature, please leave a comment. But the gist of it is that in getting the demo up and running, I've just removed the signature part. So in my bubble app, I have a search box, and I've set it to geographic places. If you launch a bubble app you're going to need to supply additional Google Maps API keys and put that into settings. Because I'm running this in my dev app, I'm basically benefiting from the generosity of Bubble with some of the some Google Maps API access. And that's how the address search works in the search box. I'm then, for my own convenience, printing the search box's values latitude and its longitude. The reason I'm doing that is because that's how the API URL knows where I want to get the image, and then I'm just using arbitrary text to make it a bit easier to organize and to format. So I've got the URL that I've taken from here, I've added in my API key, and I've removed the signature. Again, you check out how you should use signatures appropriately in order to add that additional layer of security to your app. You really don't want someone to spend hundreds of dollars in your Google Ads account, Google Ads, Google Developer Console account, doing all sorts of things that could result in you not only losing loads of money, but also perhaps getting banned, depending on how they use the APIs. But the end result of that is something like this. What else shall we have? Shall we have a Tower Bridge? Oh, location could not be found. Okay, so it couldn't find that location. Maybe because the lat long. I don't know. What else shall we try? Should we try London Eye? London Eye. Okay, I happen to used to live in London, and I know that is the London Eye, but we're looking the wrong way. In fact, I reckon that those cables there are supporting it. This is a very effective way of displaying an image of an address, perfect if you're developing any sort of property app, or basically anything that uses addresses, and you want to show your user the Street View image. You can do that using the Street View static API. Last bit from me. Remember, protect your API keys at all costs.